Hi, you're welcome back. This is clip 1 on conventional generation. You may have seen the clip 1A, B, etc. It's not essential, but hope you did. Now, energy is a force to do work. It cannot be created, it can only be converted from one form to another. A typical example is you get petrol in your car. About 55% of it comes out in torque on your wheels to drive your wheels, and the rest is dissipated through heat and friction. So when you use energy, you divide one form of it into another, and you usually divide into either 2, 3 or more different components, and one is usually the only one you use. So the rate at which it divides into the one you need is its efficiency. So if it has a potential to give 100 and it gives 55, then its rate of efficiency is 55%. Now there are various sources: moving water, engines, windmills, all that stuff, nuclear reactors, various forms of primary energy production that can be converted into electricity. The thing is that we do not need energy at all. That's a myth. And that's one of the central points to this story. What we really need is power. It doesn't matter where the power comes from, you can always convert it into what you need. But you can't convert all forms of energy into usable forms of power. So if we look at Ireland's conventional generation systems and the way demand goes, this is 12 o'clock at night and it's about 1.6 gigawatts. So it starts off here and it goes down to about 8 o'clock, and by midday in the day it's up till here. But 5 o'clock in the evening then it's up fairly high, and then it drops down again till 12 o'clock at midnight equals this. So you have this bump with about 5 o'clock in the evening being the highlight of it. Now midwinter is the time, midwinter peak. There's always a day in the winter time when we reach peak demand. And the biggest on record there was, I think it's January 2010. The maximum we drew was 4,952 megawatts, or 4.9 gigawatts, and that was in January 2010. Now if you take our total ability to generate conventional power, it adds up to 6,227 megawatts according to the Department of Energy. And if you divide our maximum peak winter demand into the amount, our total ability to generate conventional power, we get 1.3. So the difference there is a surplus or a reserve, and you need a reserve of about 20% above demand in case maybe at a football match or a good show on telly everybody goes in and turns on the electric kettle at the very same time. You have to try and cater for that increase in demand, and that's known as capacity reserve. Now conventional plant falls into a few headings, and it's important to understand them. One is base load plant. It's generally a big boiler, a big generator, so converting the heat energy into mechanical energy through a turbine, and the mechanical energy into electrical energy. It can be fueled by coal, it can be fueled by oil or any source, even turf, or even gas if you have to, and it can be fueled by nuclear power. The only difference is how it's fueled, how it's heated. Now it's designed to run continuously. You turn on this for maybe 3 months, 4 months. It's designed to run and give maximum efficiency when running continuously. It takes a minimum of 8 hours to start, if it's fossil fuel, and if it's nuclear it can take 24 hours to get it going. So it takes a long time to get it started. If you put sudden heat into vast amounts of water, it's the very same as putting a coal bottle on a hot stove. It'll crack it. The heat used to get it from naught temperature or to room temperature up to working temperature is wasted. You can't use that heat till it's wasted, and indeed arguably the heat allowing it to cool down is wasted too. Now heavy plant is very efficient. In the case of oil, it uses a form of oil that's not used for other types of transport, etc. So that it suits the oil companies to use it in this. It's called heavy fuel oil. Now the other thing is it has high inertia, and just to explain to you inertia, you probably have seen our little generator earlier, and I have to hold it up here to avoid this is a little lamp, so it's on the 1 and 2, but just to explain what inertia is, Inertia is the weight of the whole system. So if you're connecting this is alternating current into another one, you have to have it roughly in sequence. So if we put it on here, we see the light lighting. And if I take it out, I don't know if you can see it there. So if I take it out here, it takes a little time for it to stop. Do it again. See that? I'm going to call out now when I turn it off. Right? It's on now. It's a plug I'm using. Right? Now, off. See that? It takes a little time. Again. Off. It takes it a little bit of time to die down. That's the weight of the system carrying it on without any power. It's the whole weight of the entire rotor in the rotor in the motor and all the works here spinning around. Yeah, I've already shown this to in clip 1, so you know what it is. So it's the weight. It's the same as if you had a bicycle and you spun the wheel round while you lift it off the ground. It will continue on for a good while. So that's the inertia. And this type of plant here has very heavy inertia. In other words, if you link a lot of these together, they tend to control the rate at which the current fluctuates in its alternating state. So they all come commonly. And if you put a few windmills into this, this will control the frequency, not the windmills. But if you increase the windmills up to much more power than these, then the windmills start to control the frequency. Now the thing about this type of plant, it has a very low marginal cost. In other words, the cost of making one extra unit is low. You can add more to it, and it's quite cheap. It's the most effective form, and it's been phased out. This is the problem. Now, conventional plant, by the way, the word merit means value. So that first plant is very high merit plant because it has a high value for making one extra unit. So conventional plant. Then we have mid-merit plant. And the classic one of this, and I want to explain it to you, is the combined cycle gas turbine. And it's really a turbojet engine. In actual fact, sometimes they take the engine off a jumbo jet. If it's a little bit dodgy about it, I don't think it's maybe so too safe, and still they can't find anything technically wrong with it. They take it off and they use it for this purpose because it's safe on the ground. Now, a turbo engine takes in air, it mixes it with fuel, it compresses it, and it drives the turbine on the way out. And it provides both thrust to get you off the ground in the aircraft, and it provides rotary motion as the turbine revolves on a shaft. So in the combined cycle gas turbine, you can use it two ways. You can use it in its open cycle, in which you just let the gases run up here and out the chimney, and that drives the generator. But if you can manage it and you have enough time, you can close off of this here and allow the gases to go up through a boiler. And that boiler then heats the water the same as the original first one I showed you, and that drives the turbine and drives the generator. The problem is this here takes about 10 minutes to get going maximum. This one here takes 9 hours because the hot gases will cause the cold water and the cold steel and the cold boiler to crack. So it takes 9 hours. So this is why even this type of turbine can be quite efficient, not as efficient as the original base load plant which I've already shown you, but it can be very efficient. But once you start using it just on the open cycle, and once you start cutting it in and out, it's not very efficient. The other form is low merit plant, and that's very high startup plant. That's a diesel engine, and it uses more fuel. It's not efficient because the reciprocating pistons are going up and down, and they're wasting power. In addition, the gases get out of the cylinders long before all the power has been taken out of them. The hydro is the best form of power of all. It's very quick to start and stop. It can be used for base load. It can be used for virtually anything. You just pull the lever and let the water out as long as you have the water, and it drives your generator. And it's based on the difference between the levels. And if you have that, you're really away in a hack. It's the best form of power of all, and arguably the most environmentally friendly. Now, the thing about the power generation is it's like tug of war. You have to keep a balance between demand and supply. If you drop demand, you must drop supply, and if you increase demand, you must increase supply. And the voltage and the phase of it is controlled by demand and supply, and they have to be kept within certain limits. Now, this word dispatchability, I'd just like to explain it to you. So It means the ability to switch it on and off. In other words, if we know there's something on next Tuesday evening, it's something that everyone's going to be looking at, or there's going to be a lot of power being used for whatever reason, can we rely on the power? Can we say we'll have any form of power? And all these type of powers, or all these type of generating systems I've shown you, they're all what we call firm. They can indeed be depended on. Within their startup range. Now you can't just decide now to turn on a closed cycle gas turbine and expect to have it, but you can plan it, and you know you have it. And operators have full control of it, so that means it's firm. That's what firm capacity means. Now a motor of course, and a generator will act interchangeably depending on speed. They'll do both purposes, and the phase can be controlled. Free from fluctuations. There's a way of doing that. If you have a number of alternating current generators, they have to be ramped into phase, and once they're in phase, they tend to go with the path of least resistance. It's like it suits each one to pull its own weight, so you don't have a problem there. But you just couldn't throw the lever and connect them up instantly. So we've seen here now how you might use in accordance to our demand. For the basic nighttime demand and a bit of the morning demand and evening demand, you'd use base load, heavy plant, running continuously, leave it running all the time. For mid-merit plant, you'd use it for this piece between about 9 in the morning till about maybe about 5:30 in the evening, and you'd bring it on just to cover that piece. And for the fast plant, the diesel engines and the water power, you'd bring it on to cover this peak, because it wouldn't pay you to leave base load plant on to cover this small amount here. Even though it might be more, it might be less efficient, you only use it for a short time and there's a faster start-up time. Now a very important point to understand, and forgive me for the art, I don't brag about it, is that we see here that high merit plant, that slow base plant, it's low fuel consumption, low emissions, and it's very efficient. The medium start plant is medium fuel consumption, medium emissions, and medium efficiency. And the fast plant, like engines and like diesel engines, is high or open cycle gas turbine. You could include this here in closed cycle gas turbine. This is open cycle gas turbine. Anyway, the fast plant is high fuel consumption, high emissions, low efficiency, low marginal cost, and low merit. Hydro is an exception. It's always good. Now the big point to remember here is that as you move from from slow starting plant to fast starting plant, it becomes less efficient. It becomes less efficient all the time, and so you can see that it's important. This likes to run continuously. This here can be stopped and started a little bit maybe, but this here, if you run it all the time, you're going to have a high fuel bill and you're going to have high emissions. So it's a direct correlation, and it's the very same as if you're cooking. The food you make that takes a couple of hours, the casserole or whatever, it's always nicer and better than something you just cook up quick or get in a fast food restaurant or something. So that makes sense, I think. So that's just to understand that. So you're talking about 8 to 9 hours to start this. Maybe 4 hours in the case of the medium plant, depending. Open cycle gas turbine will start virtually as fast as fast plant, maybe about 15-20 minutes. But the combined cycle, to use the efficient form of it, can take as long as the slow plant. So generally speaking, you could say that this is maybe 8 to 9 hours to start. This is somewhere from maybe 10-15 minutes to 8 hours in between, and there are variations. And this one here is online straight away. You can nearly click it in straight away. So you see that. Now, one important thing is these terms come up and they can be used to fool people. It's very basic. That's load factor. It's also called capacity factor. Once the word factor appears in it, it means this load factor or whatever, once you see the word factor. And it's the actual output of a generator expressed as the percentage of potential output in 1 year. So if you take base load plant, if it ran 11 months of the year, then that would be its load factor. But it says ran 90% of the time, then its load factor is 90%. If a windmill only provided power 25% of the time, its load factor is 25. This has no bearing on whether that power is wanted or whether its time is at the best or whether it correlates with demand. It's simply the amount of power it produces as a percentage of what it could produce if it was running for 1 year. Generally speaking, if you have a home generator for just doing maybe drilling or something away from where you have power, it might have a very low, it might have a 0.01 load factor. You mightn't be using it hardly at all. But anyway, that's what load factor means, and it is important when you invest in plant that it has a good load factor so that you get a good return on it rather than having it lying idle. The next point is different to load factor, and it's important too if you see it. It's called capacity credit, or credit capacity, or firm capacity in America. And this is a vital term. This is recognized in the industry. It's not to be confused with load factor. It's the amount of other plant that can be shut down and replaced by the one being measured without endangering supply. Okay, just to get that again. This doesn't measure in the electricity produced in the particular plant. It measures it in what you can save. In other words, what's its real contribution to the system. So if I buy a system to generate power at home and I'm still paying the same bill this year when I have it as last year when I didn't, really, why is that? So it relates to the credit capacity. It's the amount of other plant, not the one you speak about, it's the one over there. If this is the plant we're talking about, it's the other one, or the other combined ones. It's the amount of other plant that can be shut down and replaced by the one being measured without endangering supply. And in relation to wind energy, it's the amount of conventional plant that can be shut down and replaced by wind without endangering supply. And this measure is very much disliked by the wind industry. They don't want to entertain this at all, despite the fact that this is a term used in the generating circles for years and years and years, and makes a lot of sense. So see, does it make sense to you? You're measuring any particular plant in what other plant you can shut down. Otherwise, it's not making a contribution. So security of supply is a very important term, particularly in relation to wind power. It means how important is it to have a supply. In an economy like Ireland or Britain or the United States, it's very important. If you were in maybe the poor people in Libya today or whatever, where there's trouble, well, maybe staying alive is more important than having electricity. So it depends on the circumstances. But if you want to reduce the security supply, and it can be measured by a thing called the loss of load, if you want to reduce it, you can do that. You don't need windmills to do it. I mean, it just depends on the economy. But we take it that there's a formula for judging it, but we take it that in Ireland you have to have a continuous supply. And in fairness, in my lifetime, there always nearly was. So it's not an exact science, and I'll tell you why. Supposing you and I were running the grid tonight, and there's good wind blowing, and we turn off a bit of plant, or we're thinking of it. If we turn it off and the wind dies down or turns into a gale, what do? Will we have a blackout? So it will affect the way we decide what plant to turn off. And if we're afraid we'll be answering to Pat Kenny tomorrow morning on his morning programme because we had a blackout in Dublin in the middle of a good match, well, then we might be a bit afraid of that, and we might have to answer to people, maybe a Dáil committee or something. So how important it is to have a security supply in Ireland? It's very important. So that affects what conventional plant you can turn off. Now, it's not an exact science, and the main thing is that to differentiate between a blackout, which is scheduled where they tell you for line fixes and line repairs, and one which is unscheduled. On the issue of storage, I won't deal with it now. I've decided to devote a short clip to it, because some people say you can store this mains power. You cannot store it. That's all baloney. There is a very limited way it can be stored. So I will deal with that, because people may often think you can have wind power stored for a week or two. That's not true. Now, the other thing is that in the case of all conventional generating plant, it works best, it's most efficient, it lasts longer when it's under constant load. And that's the same as you driving your car along a motorway. When it's going at 56 miles an hour, when you have a nice steady pull on it, you even feel that it's efficient, it's doing good. Whereas if you're in a town and you have to stop at lights and pedestrian crossing, it's not suiting the car as well. So it's the very same with conventional plant. So that's basically in conventional plant, and it's very, very important to note, because what we're talking about doing in greater amounts now is we're talking about integrating large amounts of wind power to run along with conventional plant. and I'm expressing my view on that is folly, that you can't do it. So hopefully that helped you to understand that conventional plant, and thank you very much. We'll see you back for the next clip 2 in a while. Thank you.